Before dawn broke over Charleston Harbor in May 1862, a black man who was legally considered property stood at the wheel of a Confederate warship, wearing a straw hat he had watched his enslaver wear for years, preparing to commit an act so audacious that even Union officers would later struggle to believe it had truly happened. Robert Smalls had been born into slavery in Beaufort, South Carolina in 1839, a coastal world of salt marshes, tides, and ships. From an early age, the sea shaped his life. As a boy, he was sent to Charleston, hired out by his enslaver to work on the docks. Charleston was one of the most important ports in the United States, and by the time Smalls was a teenager, it was also a city bristling with Confederate guns, flags, and fear. The Civil War had turned the harbor into a fortress. Fort Sumter stood like a stone fist in the water, cannons pointing outward toward the Union blockade that loomed just beyond the horizon. Smalls learned fast. He loaded ships, repaired rigging, and listened. He watched white sailors navigate channels by memory, learned how tides shifted sandbars, memorized signal flags, and absorbed the routines of the harbor. Enslaved labor made the Confederate war effort possible, and Smalls became so skilled that he was eventually assigned as the de facto pilot of a transport ship called the CSS Planter. Officially, he could not hold the title of captain because he was black, but in practice, he knew the ship better than anyone on board. The Planter was no ordinary vessel. It carried artillery, ammunition, and Confederate officers. It planted mines in the harbor and transported supplies between forts. Smalls steered it past gun batteries night after night, saluting sentries with precise whistle blasts and flag signals. Each successful voyage made him more valuable to the Confederacy and more dangerous to himself. If the ship were captured, or if he made a single mistake, he would be executed or sold away from his family. Smalls was married to Hannah Jones, an enslaved woman who worked as a hotel maid. They had children together, and the threat that his family could be sold haunted him constantly. In Charleston, rumors spread quickly. Enslaved families disappeared overnight. Smalls understood that skill alone would never protect him or his loved ones. Freedom, if it came at all, would have to be taken. By 1862, the Union blockade had tightened, and Union ships lurked just outside the harbor mouth. Smalls began to plan something that seemed impossible. He would steal the Planter itself, sail it past the Confederate defenses, and deliver it to the Union Navy. It was not a reckless impulse. It was a calculated gamble born of months of observation. Smalls knew the guard rotations. He knew the signals. He knew that the white officers often went ashore at night, leaving the enslaved crew aboard. The plan depended on timing and nerve. On the night of May 12, 1862, the Planter docked at a wharf near Smalls's home. As usual, the white captain and officers disembarked, trusting that no enslaved man would dare challenge the entire Confederate system alone. Smalls waited until the officers were gone, then quietly gathered the rest of the black crew. They had rehearsed this moment in whispers. There would be no turning back. Before departing, Smalls sent a small boat to pick up Hannah, their children, and the families of other crew members. They hid below deck. If the attempt failed, their presence would seal everyone's fate. Then, Smalls put on the captain's straw hat and coat, disguising his silhouette in the darkness. It was not perfect, but it might be enough. Just before dawn, the Planter eased away from the dock. Smalls stood at the wheel, heart pounding, and guided the ship toward the first checkpoint. Confederate sentries challenged the vessel. Smalls answered with the exact whistle signals he had memorized, mimicking the captain's posture and gestures. The guards, seeing what they expected to see, waved the ship through. One by one, the Planter passed Fort Johnson, Fort Ripley, and finally Fort Sumter itself, the symbolic heart of the Confederacy. Each moment stretched unbearably long. Cannons loomed overhead. A single wrong signal would bring instant destruction. Smalls gave the final salute, and Fort Sumter responded. As the ship cleared the last Confederate guns, Smalls did something extraordinary. He ordered the Confederate flag lowered and raised a white bedsheet in its place. The planter turned toward the open sea, heading straight for the Union blockade. Union sailors aboard the USS Onward saw a Confederate ship approaching and prepared to fire. Only at the last moment did they notice the white flag. When Smalls brought the planter alongside, he reportedly called out, "Good morning, sir. I've brought you some of the old United States guns, sir." The Union officers were stunned. Here was a Confederate ship, fully intact, carrying artillery, ammunition, and crucial intelligence about harbor defenses, and here was the man who had delivered it, calmly explaining how he had done so. Smalls and the others stepped onto Union decks as free people. The news spread rapidly. Newspapers across the North hailed Smalls as a hero. His act was more than daring. It was strategically significant. The information he provided helped the Union Navy tighten its grip on Charleston. For many Americans, his story shattered racist assumptions about intelligence, courage, and leadership. Freedom did not end Smalls's struggle. He became an advocate for allowing black men to serve in the Union Army and Navy, arguing from personal experience that they were not only capable, but essential. Later, he served as a pilot for Union ships, navigating the same dangerous waters he had once escaped, this time under the United States flag. After the war, Smalls returned to Beaufort, where he purchased the very house in which he had once been enslaved. It was an act heavy with symbolism. He entered politics during Reconstruction, serving in South Carolina legislature and eventually in the United States Congress. In Washington, he fought for civil rights, public education, and equal treatment for black Americans. He argued fiercely against segregation, famously stating that his race needed no special defense, only equal laws. Smalls faced relentless opposition. The promises of Reconstruction were steadily undermined by violence, intimidation, and discriminatory laws. Yet he remained a towering figure in his community, respected even by some former enemies for his integrity and courage. He lived long enough to see many of the freedoms he fought for stripped away by Jim Crow, a bitter reminder that progress in America was not straight nor guaranteed. When Robert Smalls died in 1915, his name faded from popular memory, overshadowed by generals and presidents. But the truth of his life remained, waiting to be rediscovered. He was a man who had studied a system designed to crush him and used its own routines against it. He did not rely on luck or chaos, but on intelligence, preparation, and an unshakable belief that he and his family deserved to be free. For an American audience, Smalls' story challenges comfortable narratives. It shows that some of the most extraordinary acts of the Civil War were not performed on battlefields, but in the quiet, terrifying hours before dawn. It reminds us that history is not only shaped by those officially in command, but by those who understand power well enough to outwit it. On that May morning in 1862, as the sun rose over Charleston Harbor, Robert Smalls transformed himself from an enslaved man into a symbol of American courage. He did not wait for freedom to be granted. He seized it with both hands, steered it through a gauntlet of guns, and delivered it unmistakably to the future.